Jeff Hardy's journey through the world of professional wrestling has been one marked by both triumph and tragedy. His incredible talents inside the ring have made him a household name, admired for his high-flying, death-defying style that set him apart from others. But as much as he has been adored by fans around the world, Hardy has also faced a very public battle with his personal demons, specifically his struggles with drug and alcohol addiction. To the outside world, Hardy's career seemed like a whirlwind of success, the kind of story many dream about. Alongside his brother Matt, Jeff was a part of the most electrifying tag team of his generation. Together, they captivated audiences with their heart-stopping stunts and their unmatched chemistry in the ring. But behind the scenes, Hardy was wrestling with an entirely different opponent, one that threatened to derail everything he had worked for. For years, his addiction issues remained a dark shadow, one that followed him throughout much of his career. It wasn't just a side note, it was a central part of his story, affecting his relationships, his career trajectory, and ultimately, his life. Hardy's battle with addiction reached a point where his career and even his survival were in jeopardy. But despite the setbacks, despite the spiraling lows, Hardy always managed to find his way back to the ring, even if only for fleeting moments. On the Insight podcast, Hardy spoke candidly about the struggles that defined so much of his life. He reflected on the times when his addiction was at its peak, moments when he would wake up with a sense of disbelief, asking himself, "What am I doing?" It was the kind of realization that hits you like a jolt to the heart, the kind of awareness that comes too late, after the damage has been done. "I never got to the point to where I had physical withdrawals from not drinking," Hardy confessed, admitting that for a long time, he had convinced himself he wasn't an alcoholic. Without the physical symptoms of withdrawal, he believed his relationship with alcohol wasn't as dangerous as it really was. Yet, despite those moments of clarity, Hardy found himself slipping back into old habits, going sober for weeks, only to give in to temptation again. The real turning point came when the consequences of his actions started catching up with him. The DUIs, the legal troubles that followed him like a dark cloud, were the warning signs he couldn't ignore any longer. "Man, I never have any intention of hurting anybody," Hardy admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "The thought of I could have possibly hurt somebody else out there on the road. I'm so sorry for that." In June 2022, Hardy's most recent DUI arrest sent shockwaves through the wrestling community. Arrested in Florida, Hardy's blood alcohol content was nearly 4 times the legal limit. The repercussions were severe. AEW, the company Hardy had signed with, suspended him indefinitely. This wasn't just another suspension, it was a defining moment in Hardy's career, a wake-up call that would force him to face the gravity of his situation. It wasn't his first time going to rehab, but this time felt different. AEW made it clear that Hardy wouldn't return to the ring until he had proven he was sober. Rehab, something Hardy had fought against in the past, became his only path forward. He recognized, for the first time in a long while, that he needed something to force him to confront his addiction head-on. "I went to rehab for the long haul, and it's exactly what I needed," he said. The long road to recovery was grueling, but Hardy found solace in the idea that he was finally on the right path. It was during his time in rehab that Hardy experienced an epiphany, a moment of clarity that helped him see his recovery in a new light. While in treatment in Florida, he recalled a moment when he stood outside and saw the sun and the moon. It was as though the universe was signaling to him that his journey to sobriety was something truly special. For the first time in a long while, Hardy felt the weight of his past lifting, replaced by a new sense of purpose. In the past, when he had gone sober, there had always been a sense of fragility, an underlying fear that he might relapse. But this time, Hardy felt different. He spoke of 2012 as one of his best years in wrestling, attributing that success to his sobriety. The clarity he felt allowed him to perform at his highest level, and it was a turning point in his career. Now, as he approaches 3 years of sobriety, Hardy has a renewed sense of excitement for the future. It's just super exciting to keep doing exactly what I've been doing and prove people wrong in the process, he said. His time with AEW eventually came to an end, but Hardy wasn't ready to hang up his boots just yet. In June 2024, after an injury had sidelined him temporarily, he made a dramatic return to TNA, his first love. He reunited with his brother Matt, and together, they claimed their third set of TNA World Tag Team Championships at the 2024 Bound for Glory event. But it wasn't just about winning titles, it was about proving to the world, and to himself, that he was still capable of greatness, even in the face of his past mistakes. Hardy's comeback wasn't just about wrestling, it was about redemption. It was about showing the fans, and more importantly himself, that he could rise from the ashes of his past. His journey was far from over. With every match, every victory, and every challenge, Jeff Hardy was proving that it wasn't too late to rewrite his story. He had been through hell and back, but now, on the other side, Hardy had found something more valuable than any championship: peace. Peace with himself. Peace with his past. And the unwavering belief that his best days, both inside and outside the ring, were still ahead of him. As for the doubters, Hardy had one thing to say to them: watch me. He had fought the hardest battle of his life and come out victorious. The story wasn't over yet, and this time, Hardy wasn't going anywhere. He had finally found the clarity and strength to stay on the path, no matter what. And as he stood beside his brother, a champion once more, the future seemed brighter than ever before. Jeff Hardy's return to the spotlight was a story that transcended wrestling. It was a story of perseverance, redemption, and the strength to rebuild after hitting rock bottom. His journey from fame to downfall, and then back to the ring, had captivated fans and critics alike. It was a tale of a man who had everything: talent, fame, and a legacy, yet lost it all to his own vices. But through his struggles, Hardy had shown that no matter how far someone falls, they can always rise again. Hardy's decision to confront his addiction had not come easily. It had taken years of denial, self-doubt, and painful consequences to finally force him to face the truth. When you live a life in public eye, every mistake, every failure, is magnified. For Jeff, this was especially true. His battles with addiction had been highly publicized, and each setback was met with criticism, judgment, and disappointment from the fans who had once adored him. But no matter how much he was knocked down, Hardy's resilience always shone through. One of the most challenging aspects of his addiction was the denial that had clouded his perception for so long. Hardy admitted that he had never reached a point where he had physical withdrawal symptoms from alcohol, leading him to believe he wasn't as far gone as he truly was. "I must not be an alcoholic because I don't get sick from not drinking," he reflected. This false sense of control kept him in a cycle of self-destruction, trying to convince himself that he wasn't in over his head. But truth was undeniable. The DUIs, the arrests, the reckless behavior, they were all symptoms of a much deeper issue that he could no longer ignore. The turning point came when Hardy's actions started to spiral out of control. His arrest in 2022 was a wake-up call that forced him to confront the reality of his situation. Nearly 4 times over the legal limit when arrested, Hardy's actions could have easily led to disaster. The idea that he could have hurt someone else, caused a tragedy, weighed heavily on him. "I never have any intention of hurting anybody," he said, his voice filled with regret. But the reality was that his actions could have had dire consequences, and that realization shook him to his core. The suspension from AEW was a necessary step in Hardy's recovery, one that gave him the space to reflect and to truly seek the help he needed. It wasn't the first time he had sought rehabilitation, but something about this time felt different. This time, he was ready to face his demons for good. Hardy credited his time in rehab for giving him the clarity he needed to embrace sobriety in a way he never had before. "I went to rehab for the long haul, and it's exactly what I needed," he said. It was a turning point in his life, a moment of self-realization that propelled him forward into a new chapter. Hardy's time in rehab was transformative, but it wasn't just the treatment itself that helped him heal, it was the small, personal moments that shifted his perspective. One of the most powerful moments came when he was in Florida, during his treatment, staring up at the sky. He spoke of the sun and the moon aligning in a way that felt spiritually significant, as if universe itself was sending him a sign. In that moment, Hardy felt something he hadn't in years: hope. He realized that sobriety wasn't just a chance to reclaim his career, it was a chance to reclaim his life. This sense of spiritual awakening, combined with the newfound clarity that came with sobriety, set the stage for Hardy's return to the ring. His career had been defined by reckless abandon, the rush of adrenaline that came from his daredevil antics. But now, he was approaching the ring with a new perspective, one grounded in sobriety, inner peace, and a deep understanding of what really mattered. Hardy was no longer chasing the high of fame or the rush of a reckless lifestyle. Instead, he was fighting for something far more important: redemption. When Hardy made his return to TNA in 2024, it was more than just a reunion with his brother Matt. It was a declaration to the world that he was back, and this time, he wasn't going to let his past define him. Hardy had made it clear that he was no longer the same man who had stumbled through the years of addiction. He was a new Jeff Hardy, one who had learned from his mistakes, grown stronger in the process, and was now ready to show the world that he was still capable of greatness. The Hardys' victory at Bound for Glory in 2024, where they captured their third TNA World Tag Team Championships, was a testament to their enduring legacy in the world of wrestling. But it was also a moment of personal victory for Jeff Hardy. Winning those titles was symbolic of his own triumph over the demons that had plagued him for so long. It was proof that he could still rise to the top, no matter how far he had fallen. In the months that followed, Hardy continued to prove that he was more than just a comeback story. He was a fighter both in and out of the ring. His dedication to sobriety and his passion for wrestling had reignited a fire inside him, one that pushed him to keep fighting for his place in the industry. Hardy was no longer chasing the approval of fans or the validation of his peers. He was fighting for himself, proving to the world, and to himself, that he was capable of so much more. His story is one of redemption, of second chances and personal growth. Jeff Hardy has shown that it's never too late to rewrite your narrative, no matter how many times you've stumbled along the way. For all the mistakes, the setbacks, and the pain, Hardy's journey has come full circle. His past may never be erased, but it no longer defines him. He has moved forward, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. As the future unfolds, Hardy's path remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: he's not done yet. Whether in the ring with his brother or embarking on new ventures, Jeff Hardy has proven that he's capable of anything. His story isn't over, it's only just beginning. Jeff Hardy's journey was never meant to be a simple story of fame and success. It was the tale of a man who lived on the edge, always willing to risk it all for a moment of glory, only to find that the greatest challenges of his life came from within himself. His path to redemption wasn't just about wrestling in the ring, it was about wrestling with his own demons and learning to face them head on. For so many years, Jeff Hardy was the epitome of the rebellious rock star persona that fans adored. His daredevil stunts, his wild energy, and his fearless attitude made him a legend in the wrestling world. His matches were a symphony of chaos, each leap off a ladder or swanton bomb from the top rope adding to the myth of the Hardy Boys. With his brother Matt by his side, Jeff became part of one of the most iconic duos in wrestling history. They didn't just win titles, they changed the game, bringing an entirely new level of excitement to the sport. But beneath the high-flying action and the raucous cheers, there was a darker side to Jeff Hardy's life that the fans didn't always see. The bright lights of success were often dimmed by the weight of addiction, and over time, that weight grew heavier and heavier. Hardy's struggles with drugs and alcohol were well known, but they went beyond the headlines. They were personal battles that nearly cost him everything: his career, his family, and his life. The stakes had never been higher, And yet, it wasn't until the world seemed to close in on him that Hardy finally began to understand the depths of his own destruction. When he reflected on those days, there was no sense of grandeur in his voice. Instead, it was a quiet recognition of how far he had fallen. He spoke about the realization that he was living in denial, constantly telling himself that he wasn't as bad as others might think. There were moments when he would wake up, look in the mirror, and ask himself, "What am I doing?" But it wasn't just the physical effects that troubled him, it was the realization that he had been numbing himself to the world around him. Hardy had become disconnected from his true self, lost in a haze of alcohol and drugs. The turning point didn't come when he hit rock bottom, though it certainly felt like it at times. For Jeff, it came in a moment of clarity, a moment where the fog lifted, even if only for a second. It wasn't one grand epiphany, but rather a slow unraveling of the life he had built for himself, a life that seemed perfect from the outside, but was hollow within. He knew something had to change. But it wasn't until the arrests, the DUIs, and the consequences of his actions caught up with him that he realized just how much he had risked. In 2022, Hardy was arrested in Florida for driving under the influence, an event that would later lead to his suspension from AEW. It was a wake-up call that he couldn't ignore any longer. "I never have any intention of hurting anybody," Hardy said, but even as he spoke those words, he knew the gravity of his mistakes. The idea that he could have caused harm to someone else, taken a life, or wrecked someone else's family, haunted him. In that moment, Hardy wasn't just scared for his career, he was scared for his own soul. But as painful as it was, that was the beginning of his recovery. Hardy was given the time and space he needed to truly confront his addiction and its roots. The condition of his AEW suspension required him to enter rehab, and despite it being his second time in treatment, Hardy found something he hadn't found before: a sense of peace. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to fully embrace sobriety and its transformative power. "Rehab was exactly what I needed," Hardy explained, almost as if he was talking to himself more than anyone else. The process wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As he worked through the steps, Hardy began to rediscover the man he had lost along the way, the man beneath the wrestler, the superstar, the persona. And it was during one particularly special moment in rehab that he had a profound spiritual realization. It wasn't just about giving up alcohol or drugs. It was about finding something greater than himself, something that could guide him out of the darkness. "I had a moment with the sun, actually, when I was in treatment," Hardy recalled, describing a moment when he felt an unspoken connection to the universe. It was as if nature itself was offering him a sign, a symbol of hope. The sky had opened up, and in that instant, Hardy understood that he wasn't just getting sober for his career, he was getting sober for his life. The clarity he gained during that period was more than just mental. It was emotional and spiritual, touching a deeper part of him that he hadn't accessed in years. And with that newfound clarity, Hardy knew he was ready to return to the ring. It wasn't about redemption in the eyes of the fans or proving his worth to anyone else. It was about proving to himself that he could overcome the demons that had haunted him for so long. And when he stepped back into the squared circle, it wasn't just a physical return, it was a return to himself. In 2024, Jeff Hardy rejoined his brother Matt in TNA, marking a triumphant return to the company and winning their third TNA World Tag Team Championship. But this victory wasn't just about another title, it was a symbol of Hardy's journey. The Hardys were back on top, but this time, Jeff wasn't just fighting for the gold. He was fighting for his own redemption. Hardy's journey was far from over. As the years passed, the road ahead remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: he had faced his darkest moments and emerged from them stronger than ever. His story is one of perseverance and transformation, a story that shows even the greatest of wrestlers can fall, but with enough strength and willpower, they can rise again. As Hardy continues to embrace his new chapter, one thing is certain: his legacy is no longer defined by his struggles, but by his triumphs. The Hardy Boys may have redefined tag team wrestling, but Jeff Hardy's most important match is the one he fought inside himself.